The first important idea of the book is that people can change their identity by acting as if they are already the person they want to become. The book suggests that success does not always begin with natural talent, strong confidence, or perfect preparation. Instead, it can begin with one clear decision: to behave like the future version of yourself before that version fully exists. This means that if a person wants to become confident, disciplined, successful, or brave, they should not wait until they feel completely ready. They should start taking actions that match that identity in the present. The book explains this idea through the example of Muhammad Ali. Before he became a world champion, he already declared that he was the greatest. At that time, he had not yet achieved everything that later made him famous, but he already acted with the belief, posture, and mindset of a champion. The lesson from this example is that Ali did not become confident only after he succeeded. Instead, his confidence helped him move towards success. In this way, the book shows that identity can come before achievement, not only after it. A person may first choose how they want to see themselves, and then their actions begin to support that identity. This idea is important because many people usually think in the opposite way. They believe they must achieve something first before they are allowed to act like that kind of person. For example, someone may think, "I will act confidently after I become successful," or "I will speak like a leader only after people respect me." However, the book argues that this mindset can keep people stuck. If people wait for confidence, permission, or perfect timing, they may never begin. Acting as if helps them close the gap between who they are now and who they are capable of becoming. However, acting as if does not mean being fake or pretending to be better than others. It means practicing the habits, language, posture, and choices of the person you want to become. For instance, a person who wants to be a confident speaker can begin by standing straighter, preparing carefully, and speaking with more clarity, even if they still feel nervous inside. Over time, these repeated behaviors can make the new identity feel more natural and real. Therefore, the first idea of the book establishes the foundation for the whole argument. People do not need to wait until they become confident or successful before changing their behavior. They can begin by acting like the person they want to become. This idea becomes even stronger in the next section, where the book explains that acting differently does not only influence external behavior, but also changes the connection between the body and the mind. After explaining that identity can be changed through action, the book continues by showing why this process is psychologically possible. It focuses on the connection between the body and the mind. The main point is that the way people move, stand, breathe, and carry themselves does not only reflect their emotions, but can also influence those emotions. In other words, behavior does not only come from feelings, feelings can also be shaped by behavior. This supports the book's argument that acting as if is not just an empty performance, but a practical way to train the mind. The book gives a simple example that most people can understand. When someone feels sad or defeated, their body often changes naturally. Their shoulders may drop, their head may lower, and their breathing may become shallow. However, the book explains that this relationship can also work in the opposite direction. If a person deliberately stands taller, opens their posture, breathes more deeply, and carries themselves with confidence, their mind may begin to respond differently. This means that the body can send signals to the brain about how to feel and how to act. This idea is important because it makes personal change feel more practical. Many people think they must first change their thoughts before they can change their behavior. For example, they may believe they need to feel confident before they can speak confidently. However, the book suggests that they can begin with the body. A person can choose to stand like a confident person, speak with a clearer voice, or walk into a room with more presence. Even if the confidence is not fully real at first, the body helps create the conditions for the mind to follow. The book also uses psychological research about powerful and weak body positions to support this point. It explains that people who hold powerful postures can feel more confident and less stressed, while people who make themselves small may feel weaker or more anxious. The purpose of this example is not to say that posture alone can solve every problem. Instead, it shows that small physical changes can influence mental state and performance. This makes the idea of acting as if more believable because it shows that the body and mind are constantly affecting each other. In my opinion, this idea is useful because it gives readers a simple first step. When changing identity feels too difficult, people can start with something small and visible, such as posture, breathing, facial expression, or tone of voice. These small actions may seem simple, but they can help a person enter a stronger mental state. Therefore, the second idea develops the first idea by explaining that acting differently is powerful because the body can help shape the mind. However, changing posture or mindset is only the beginning. The book then develops this idea further by showing that real confidence is not created by waiting, but by taking action. After showing that the body and mind are strongly connected, the book moves to another important idea: confidence is created through action. Many people believe that they must feel confident before they can do something difficult. They may wait until they feel ready before speaking in public, starting a project, applying for a better job, or making an important decision. However, the book argues that this way of thinking is wrong. Confidence is not usually the starting point. Instead, confidence is the result of taking action again and again. The book explains this idea through what it calls the confidence action loop. This means that when a person takes action, even while feeling afraid or uncertain, they create evidence that they are capable. That evidence then builds real confidence. Once confidence grows, the next action becomes easier and the process continues. For example, a person learning to ride a bike does not wait until they feel completely confident before getting on the bike. They get on, try, make mistakes, fall, and slowly become more confident through practice. The same process can apply to almost every area of life. This idea is closely connected to the earlier point about acting as if. When someone acts like a confident person, they do not need to feel fully confident immediately. The action itself becomes the training. For example, someone who is afraid of speaking in meetings can begin by making one small comment. After doing this once, they may realize that nothing terrible happened. The next time, they may speak a little more. Over time, these small actions create proof that they are able to communicate, contribute, and handle pressure. Confidence then becomes something real, not something imagined. The book's message is powerful because it removes the excuse of waiting. Many people delay their goals because they believe they are not ready yet. They think they need more courage, more knowledge, or more certainty before they begin. However, the book suggests that readiness often appears after the first step, not before it. If people wait until fear disappears, they may never move forward, but if they act despite fear, they slowly train themselves to become stronger. In my opinion, this idea is one of the most practical messages in the book. It teaches readers that confidence is not a personality trait that only some people are born with. It is a skill that can be built through repeated action. Every small step becomes evidence of capability. Therefore, after explaining the connection between body and mind, the book shows that real transformation requires movement. Once people understand that action creates confidence, the book moves to a deeper point. Repeated actions do not only build confidence, but also shape a person's identity. Once the book explains that confidence is built through action, it moves to a deeper idea. Repeated actions do not only create confidence, but also shape a person's identity. The book argues that the way people see themselves has a strong influence on how they behave. If someone believes they are weak, unsuccessful, or incapable, they are more likely to make choices that confirm that belief. However, if they begin to see themselves as disciplined, confident, or capable, their actions will slowly change to match that new identity. This idea is shown through the examples in the book. For instance, an out-of-shape person may say, "I need to lose weight before I can be athletic." This sentence shows that the person is waiting for a result before accepting a new identity. In contrast, an athletic person thinks, "I am an athlete, so I train and take care of my body." The difference is not only in the action, but in the identity behind the action. When people identify as a certain kind of person, their daily decisions become more natural. They don't need to force every choice because the behavior begins to feel connected to who they are. The book also applies this idea to creative work. Many people may say, "I will call myself a writer when I get published." However, the book suggests that a writer is someone who writes. In this view, identity is not something people receive from outside validation. It is something they build through consistent action. A person becomes a writer by writing, a leader by leading, and a confident speaker by speaking. This is an important message because it encourages readers to claim their future identity through action rather than waiting for permission from others. This idea is powerful because identity can either limit or support personal growth. If a person repeatedly says, "I am not good at this," their brain may accept that statement and stop looking for improvement. But if they say, "I am learning this skill," they create space for progress. The book does not suggest that people should ignore reality. Instead, it encourages them to choose an identity that helps them grow. A person may not be perfect yet, but they can still act in the direction of who they want to become. In my opinion, this idea is important because it explains why small daily actions matter. Every time a person acts like their future self, they strengthen that identity. Over time, the behavior becomes more natural, and the new identity feels more real. Therefore, the book shows that transformation is not only about doing different things, but about becoming a different version of yourself. After explaining how identity shapes behavior, the book then focuses on another important tool, the language people use to describe themselves and their future. After explaining that identity shapes behavior, the book develops this point further by focusing on the language people use to describe themselves. The book argues that words are not just simple expressions. They can influence how people think, feel, and act. In particular, the words that come after "I am" are very powerful because they often become part of a person's identity. When people repeatedly say negative things about themselves, they may begin to believe those statements and behave according to them. For example, if someone says, "I am terrible at public speaking," their brain may start looking for evidence to confirm that belief. They may notice every mistake, every awkward pause, and every moment of nervousness. As a result, they become even more convinced that they are not a good speaker. However, if the same person says, "I am developing my speaking skills," the meaning changes. This sentence does not pretend that the person is already perfect, but it creates space for improvement. The person may begin to notice small signs of progress, such as speaking more clearly, preparing better, or feeling less nervous than before. This idea connects closely with the book's message about acting as if. If people want to become a better version of themselves, they need to speak in a way that supports that identity. The book suggests replacing limiting language with more empowering language. For instance, instead of saying "I can't," a person can say "I haven't learned it yet." Instead of saying "I'm trying," they can say "I'm working on it." These small changes may look simple, but they can slowly change the way a person sees their own ability. The book does not suggest that people should lie to themselves or ignore their weaknesses. Rather, it encourages them to use language that focuses on growth instead of fixed limitations. There is a big difference between saying, "I am not good at this," and "I am learning how to do this." The first sentence closes the door to improvement, while the second sentence keeps the door open. This shows that language can either trap people in their current identity or help them move toward a better one. In my opinion, this idea is very useful because many people limit themselves without realizing it. Their negative self-talk becomes a quiet habit, and over time, it affects their confidence and choices. By changing their vocabulary, they can begin to change their mindset. Therefore, the book shows that transformation does not only come from physical action, but also from the words people use every day. After discussing the power of language, the book then moves to another challenge in personal growth: how to deal with the inner critic and self-doubt. After discussing the power of language, the book moves to another important challenge in personal growth: the inner critic. The inner critic is the negative voice inside a person's mind that questions their ability and worth. It may say things such as, "Who do you think you are? You are not ready. People will think you are fake," or "You will look stupid if you fail." The book explains that this voice is very common, especially when people try to act as if they are more confident, successful, or capable than they currently feel. This idea is important because self-doubt often appears at the exact moment when people are trying to grow. When someone wants to speak up, start a new project, apply for a better job, or present themselves with more confidence, the inner critic may immediately become louder. It tries to protect them from embarrassment, rejection, or failure. However, the book argues that although this voice may feel powerful, it should not be allowed to control a person's actions. If people wait until the inner critic disappears, they may never take the steps needed to change their life. The book makes a strong point that people do not need to completely silence the inner critic before they act. Instead, they need to act anyway. This is closely connected to the earlier idea that confidence comes from action. A person may still feel nervous, uncertain, or afraid, but they can still choose the behavior of their future self. For example, someone may feel afraid before speaking in a meeting, but they can still raise their hand and share one idea. That action creates evidence that they are capable, even if the fear is still present. The book also reframes imposter syndrome in a positive way. Many people feel like a fraud when they enter a new role or challenge themselves beyond their comfort zone. However, the book suggests that this feeling can be a sign of growth. A person only feels like an imposter when they are stepping into a bigger identity that they have not fully adjusted to yet. Therefore, self-doubt does not always mean that someone is unqualified. Sometimes it means they are expanding. In my opinion, this idea is useful because it makes personal growth feel more realistic. The book does not promise that fear will disappear immediately. Instead, it teaches that fear and action can exist at the same time. This is a more practical message because most people will still feel nervous when they try something new. Therefore, the book shows that the inner critic should be noticed but not obeyed. After explaining how to deal with self-doubt, the book then becomes more practical by introducing specific strategies that help people act as if in daily life. After explaining how people can deal with self-doubt and the inner critic, the book becomes more practical by introducing specific strategies that help readers act as if in daily life. This is an important part of the book because it does not only give motivational ideas. It also shows readers how to apply those ideas through small, realistic actions. The book suggests that transformation is not created by one big moment, but by repeated habits that train the mind and body to follow a new identity. One of the strategies mentioned in the book is the morning identity ritual. This means that before starting the day, a person should spend a few minutes imagining and embodying their future self. They can stand with confidence, breathe deeply, and ask themselves how the person they want to become would handle the day. This practice helps set the direction for their behavior. Instead of beginning the day with doubt, distraction, or fear, they begin with intention. In this way, the morning ritual becomes a way to remind the brain of the identity they are trying to build. Another useful strategy is the as-if question. When facing a difficult decision, the person can ask, "If I were already confident, successful, and capable, what would I do right now?" This question is powerful because it moves people away from fear and toward possibility. For example, instead of avoiding an email, a meeting, or a challenging conversation, the person can choose the action that their future self would take. The question makes growth more immediate because it turns a large personal goal into one clear action in the present moment. The book also discusses practical details such as dressing the part, changing vocabulary, and collecting evidence of capability. These strategies may seem small, but they support the larger process of identity change. Dressing differently can send a signal to the brain about how to behave. Using stronger language can reduce limiting beliefs. Recording daily wins can help people notice evidence that they are improving. Together, these habits create an environment that supports the new identity. In my opinion, this idea is important because many self-development books only tell readers to believe in themselves, but this book gives more concrete steps. It shows that confidence and identity can be practiced through daily routines, questions, language, and evidence. Therefore, the practical strategies connect all the earlier ideas together, acting differently, using the body, taking action, shaping identity, changing language, and overcoming self-doubt. After giving these strategies, the book moves to its final message. Small actions, repeated consistently, can create long-term transformation. After giving practical strategies for acting as if, the book moves to its final and most important message. Real transformation is created through small actions repeated over time. The book does not present change as something that happens suddenly or magically. Instead, it explains that becoming a new version of yourself is a gradual process. Every time a person chooses to act like their future self, they strengthen that identity. Each action may look small on its own, but when repeated consistently, it can create a powerful long-term result. The book describes these small actions as votes for a new identity. This means that every decision a person makes is a signal about who they are becoming. For example, when someone who wants to be healthier chooses to exercise, eat better, or sleep earlier, they are voting for the identity of a healthy person. When someone who wants to be a writer writes a few pages every day, they are voting for the identity of a writer. One action alone may not completely change a person's life, but many actions repeated over time can reshape how they see themselves. This idea connects strongly with all the previous ideas in the book. Acting as if begins the process. The body and mind support the change. Action builds confidence. Identity shapes behavior. Language influences belief. And practical strategies make the process easier to follow. However, none of these ideas will work without consistency. The book suggests that transformation becomes real when people continue acting in alignment with their future self, even when progress feels slow. This is why small daily choices are more important than temporary motivation. The book also explains that after enough repetition, there comes a point when the person is no longer acting anymore. The new behavior becomes natural. For example, the person who once pretended to be confident in meetings eventually becomes genuinely confident because they have practiced speaking and making decisions many times. The person who once forced themselves to train eventually sees themselves as an athlete. This is the moment when acting as if turns into real identity. In my opinion, this final idea is powerful because it gives hope, but also reminds readers of responsibility. The future self is not created by wishing, waiting, or only thinking positively. It is created by daily actions. Therefore, the book's overall message is that people should stop waiting for confidence, permission, or perfect conditions. They should begin today with one small action that matches the person they want to become. This final idea completes the book's argument by showing that long-term transformation is built one choice at a time.